and it's been a public resource at this point. I know that we'll go on to talk about some of the projects we've been working on, but just in the Legacy Cannabis Genetics project, your name comes up because these interviews have been used as an oral history.
Yeah, who would have thought?
Yeah, and I was making a joke to our friend Jim Coffis, who I was with earlier today.
Jim.
Who, for those in the streaming sphere, he's just another one of us who
Great
went
guy.
into cannabis politics, an older gentleman. But he was. I was telling him, I was like, yeah, when we had these conversations, a lot of the time we thought we were talking about the future, but really we were documenting the present for the past. And so not to say that some of this stuff we'll get into isn't exactly sort of our vision in a bizarro way of what that future could have been, or the hundreds of people who came on this show and really gave a dedicated, good description of what was going on and what they were doing. And I think it didn't work out quite as anyone would have expected, and it would be really easy to sit here and talk about what was lost and what was and shoulda, woulda, coulda, and all these things, but I don't think that's quite helpful, and I also don't think it tells the complete story of what's actually going on in cannabis if we zoomed out just a little bit. And so when we were in the hall, I opened with a, provocative joke, but I said, Chris, this is the best time to ever be in cannabis, minus the money.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which is, kind of a statement right there. But when I'm, really thinking about it and I'm really zoomed out, I'm like, well, there's not a ton of people making a living that I know off of it, especially not like the 2012, 13, 14 era when you and I first met. A good percentage of this community in Santa Cruz was living off the cannabis industry in one way or another. 100%. And that was true for the Sierra Foothills and absolutely true for the counties we all know as the historic cannabis production zones. You drive through there and you don't need to be explained the economic value of what once was, because it's gone.
Yeah.
And in Santa Cruz, we haven't noticed as much of that because there's been the Silicon Valley to every person who's displaced. There's the person to replace them. Yeah. And that story here is one bit of it. But then also, if you think about what I think you and I both sort of grew up in, which was places where cannabis wasn't treated as harshly as in other places at the time.
Yeah.
And you could also say that both of the places where, you and I grew up, and then Santa Cruz where you has made your home and your children are growing up, there still exists a commitment to excellence in cannabis.
Amen.
Right?
100%.
And so we came out of cultures, a little bubble of legal protection with a commitment to excellence in cannabis.
Yeah.
And I think if you view that as the gift, aside from, the healing power that I know both you and I have experienced in a non-cheesy way, and the people that we've been able to help through medical cannabis, aside from that gift, the gift of that culture of excellence and a little bit of legal protection was, what brought both you and I here. And we can say that circumstance applies to more people now than ever before in our lives. There are more people across the country and the world that have the freedom to grow some plants.
Yeah.
And there is access to genetic material like you and I have never seen before.
Yeah.
There are clones that, reportedly people have died over that you can buy on the internet for $50.
Yeah, and they'll be delivered.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the other part. Is they'll come in the mail and they're well packaged and grow well.
Yeah, and so no longer is the genetic material limiting point for where you can go with your seed breeding projects and passion. So more people have access to that, and then more people have the freedom to actually start partaking in this culture of excellence that I would argue now has metastasized and gone worldwide.
Yeah,
You and I maybe have had the very real privilege of that our entire lives. But in other places, I have family in Rhode Island who were involved in, the fledgling medical cannabis thing in a very non-commercial, small way. But I've watched that culture spread to Rhode Island.
Yeah.
I just recently got on Instagram and,
right on.
got the exposure to the whole seed world of what's going on there
Yeah,
directly. Sure. And there's people that are located all throughout the world who are growing some plants and really, really passionate about making the best plants possible. And even though we can make jokes about the quality of cannabis not being what it used to be, there is weed out there being grown on every corner of this planet that is top notch by any measure, by any era. And that really, when we think about that, that is going to be the backbone for money possibly in the future. And so the bit of cannabis is it's the best time in cannabis ever minus the money.
Yeah.
Is also an acknowledgement of that there's still a huge amount of potential in cannabis. And so just because we're at a certain location where the money isn't flowing as easily as it used to be, and we've watched, the decimation of a way of life and whole class of citizens
People,
at a certain level.
Across the whole West Coast.
Yeah.
People sold their farms. People sold,
Yeah, but that's, that is, unfortunately, and we could have the bigger discussion, par for the course for the economy we live under.
Yeah,
sure.
Sure.
And a lot of people who are displaced out of there, my joke all the time is like, when the Detroit auto factories started closing, those workers didn't necessarily lose their job for a greater purpose, And so I'm kind of here to, in some sense, talk about that, greater good, that, I do believe we're coming out of worldwide from one paradigm of prohibition that is across the board negative, that does not work for anybody. It might momentarily work for a few people, and it might somehow work for a couple of groups that get funding to go after folks, but ultimately it's not a productive thing. It only harms people, and it makes the rest of the economy and the rest of the country or the world just on shakier political ground, because we're having this policy that is unenforceable and doesn't make sense and harms people. So it undermines everything positive we're trying to do, and we're coming out of that era. We've seen major movement throughout the world. We've seen California, in some senses, take the most ridiculous approach to a tax and regulate so-called legalization project, or experiment that hasn't panned out, but it also has set, in many times, not the best model, but it has set, and other states have set models, and other countries have set models, and we can acknowledge none of those are good in their self, but they are, they're not good rules. They're not, there's some of them are better than others, and we can get into that, but
it's true.
well, for the most part, they're not working. But what they are doing is they're replacing a system that absolutely was not working at all, And so I was in, Australia for a body surfing contest.
Oh, good,
story or whatever.
Different many lives of Pat.
Arriving in Australia, I was able to get a medical card.
Oh, wow.
And purchase.
How was that experience?
It was amazing. I just said I was from Santa Cruz and in the industry, and the doctor could sleep on my couch when he was in town, and we were all friends, That's a little oversimplification, but,
You did get a card.
Yeah, I went and made an appointment and got in and saw the doctor and was prescribed things, and, so just first off the bat, the change in Australia is, night and day from a few years back talking to people, because there wasn't a...
It was pretty draconian.
Yeah, there wasn't a gray area, and it was like, it was still organized crime involved with distribution, whatever you
Yep.
think of that. And there's, that system was fairly quickly replaced by a medical system.
Wow,
And
fantastic.
a lot of it's online and there's deliveries, but I went to a brick and mortar place, and
Wow.
interestingly enough, some of the cannabis I got was the banjo cut.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
How wild.
And
Full
well, it's
circle.
this is another
You
tangent we'll
you
go
were working
into.
with them when they were.
Well, yeah, there's a weird series of events
Yeah.
that got it, but they basically had Canadian cannabis that was imported, that was on the shelf.
Whoa.
And the doctor is like, when he's going through and prescribing things, he's like, oh, well, this God's gift is from British Columbia. And my initial reaction as a proud Californian is like,
Beasters.
you trying to sell me some beasters here? And then I was
With
like,
that Bama?
and then I lit up and I was like, oh, this is to Australian British Columbian cannabis is
Great.
like
It's a
French
top
cannabis,
shelf.
French wine to us. It's
How
like
interesting.
they're
Just
famous.
the perspective.
And the flower was amazing.
It was good.
Yeah, it would be A grade anywhere in the world.
Got it.
Not the best we'd ever seen, but for
solid.
in a jar shipped around the world. We
It's
can't.
impressive.
We have a hard time shipping it across the county and
That's
keeping
right.
it boutique.
You get it
so
to Sacramento for a
yeah,
state fair.
yeah. So getting it to Australia.
Impressive.
So anyway, and so the and then I smoked, not discreetly, but I smoked without fear in Australia.
It's really
Right?
cool.
And that's
when you're talking about international perspective, you're speaking from experience, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, and it also lit up my head. I'm like, well, one day they're going to be bragging about Santa Cruz weed in this exact thing, because they're already got the banjo cut. The first
there's already some.
the first strain mentioned when I was in the waiting room was Blue Dream.
Yeah,
so
Santa
there's
Cruz.
the impact around the world that we're having, and so all the other states that used to be in our just within our lifetime, real long, life ruining prison sentences. Like they've decriminalized, medicalized, rolled back, or slanging THCA. Like who the hell knows
Yeah.
what? But you're not. There's ways to have access in Texas right now,
That's true.
which is a
Wild.
mind-boggling. So a child in Texas right now, when they get 27 and a half and can finally use cannabis without impacting their development, they're gonna be in that culture of excellence, and there might be a little bubble for them to be excited about cannabis. And so that's this broader zoomed back. If we don't look at each thing as its individual piece, but this is a larger continuum of global cannabis policy, it's very hard to make the case that we're not doing better than we were.
Yeah,
And you can
I completely concur, and
You
it's
know?
a refreshing perspective.
And so you can, and you and I, we know we could go over our personal stories of difficulties in this thing. And so this is not like a naive statement or, trying to let regulators, large investors, all the, crooked hustlers off the hook for what we have, because it is a mess.
It's broken.
It's really bad.
Yeah.
But it's not nearly as bad as cops and robbers and kicking your door in, even though we still got cops and robbers.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
the life ruining
true.
scenarios of this are happening to less people worldwide today, and that's something to be not necessarily proud of, but to acknowledge.
Amen.
Yeah. And so
That's important.
yeah, and so and I'm kind of just speaking just this. I don't really care if this is people's perspective or not. I'm just talking to you as two weed people that haven't seen each other in a little while that are consoling things. But this is the genuine perspective I'm trying to spread. I also will make an acknowledgement of that. The politics surrounding cannabis were very heated. There is, I won't say stakeholders, but so many interested parties who exerted their political influence on this, and they are not as interested as they used to be.
Not
right?
at all. Some are not involved at all.
Yeah, and so now, ironically, that cannabis has face planted, like the political task of getting regulations that are cannabis issues, when we've been doing them for the last 10 years locally or at the state level, there's a lot of not just opposition but interested parties. There's labor unions, there's environmental groups, and all these
various agendas.
Yeah. And a lot of the times agendas that we might think are valid, especially outside of cannabis.
100%.
So it's a political process, and I'm saying that there's less, there's less political stakeholders that are still at the table right now.
That are still interested, yeah.
And so that should be seen as an opportunity in a bizarro way progress, And then, so to get into kind of like from a local or California-wide cultivation perspective, right? Like both of us are passionate cannabis gardeners. I think both of us would like to, do it professionally and have small farms at some point in our life. And, there's a conversation that I have with a lot of folks about, what it's going to take to get there. I think a lot of us understand what the destination kind of looks like, and it's not that far off from the vision that we've been saying for 10 years of finding a way for small farms that are able to be, in homestead type locations and that have a real boutique product that is a combination of the, environment, the people working there, and the, culture surrounding it, all the genetic, all this stuff that makes cannabis special. And that could be a, small indoor, it could be greenhouses, it could be outdoor. The shape of that is a lot of different things for different people, but really like producing the best weed.
Yeah, excellent. So
I just want to make just culture of excellence. We want to be the best, really or make our shot at doing something interesting that people appreciate. And so, like, the route to that is basically something along the lines of cannabis being treated like any other plant and treated like ag. And so that is both a goal of the small craft, for lack of a better term, aspiring farmer, and it's also a goal of anyone growing cannabis in the state, is that, like, we need parity with ag. And there's this crazy situation where hemp has had parity with ag and exists in the same world, so it's not like there isn't a model for us to follow. It is completely possible. And I'm not saying that, like, in the political reality of today, there's not some, age restrictions always, and then there's probably some tax thing that is going to be there that you and I, if it's going to good things, we might be proud of that and work it into our future marketing. But as it is right now, we're not treated like ag. It's this, especially at the local level, you've got, now you need to do a new use and get just go through the whole planning department and permitting process like you were building a condo.
Exactly. Or manufacturing, Lockheed Martin stuff.
Yeah, and so it is what it is, but that there's a little longer-ish point, but that political, all the political stakeholders at the table kind of make it harder and harder for us to ever get to that parity with that.
The dream.
So I'm throwing out there, maybe it's a good thing that cannabis isn't in the public eye and isn't as contentious of an issue right now, even though it's absolutely still contentious. Just saying, we're moving a little further away.
It's not as frothy, and I think that green rush frothiness is gone.
Yeah,
and those the stakeholders or profiteering people are no longer interested. They've moved on to other things.
Yeah,
I feel like that's a lot. Like, people that are still here are so dedicated.
Yeah,
because it's not really profitable anymore.
Yeah, I mean, it's thin the herd in an amazing way. And what the analogy that I joke around with this is like, the cannabis circus comes to town. It came to Santa Cruz somewhere around 2012 and a half or whatever, and it landed in New York at some point. It was in Thailand, and now it's like arrived in Germany and just all this stuff. And so a good question model of what California has to offer is like, what happens when the circus leaves town?
Yeah.
Like, what happens when the investor dollars aren't being thrown at everyone? What happens when it's not
Good
a
question.
sexy political issue that the politicians and regulators are looking at expanded budgets and tax revenues? Like, what happens when the face plant is apparent and everybody packs up, and then what are you left with? And so in California, I would still say we're left with some residual positive things. And, two of those things that I know that we've talked about before, I actually think the last time I was on the show was with Janine from the Origins Council, and we were kind of getting into some of these like silver linings of the dysfunctional state regs, right? And one of those things that, there's a few of them, but one of the things that Californians voted for and was built into Prop 64 is the creation of an Appellation of Origins program.
Nice.
And so that's like the wine terroir, similar to what is in Napa and throughout Santa Cruz County with these wine
AVAs kind of.
Yeah, and so the that, like anything, is taken. I mean, it was passed in 2016. We're almost 2026 here, so it's almost
a decade.
Almost taken a decade, but we've got what we're hoping are pretty close to the final regs coming through. That program, there was recently a hearing a little bit ago with the CDFA who's administering the program, and that will be a reality semi-soon. Now, will there be anyone in California who qualifies for an appellation with the money to go through this?
Yeah.
Maybe. But there's, also things in the works to, try to figure out how to, do that lift, as the state and develop this appellation program as much as we can so that the cost isn't, unaffordable to people who are, farming a non-profitable crop right now.
Yeah.
But, you and I, as currently not, we don't have a hillside that we're trying to do an appellation at right now because the entire regulatory package and the market doesn't pencil out.
Yeah.
But these are kind of things that will, so to back up one step, if things don't pencil out for anybody right now, it's, probably a blessing to not be involved directly.
Yeah, totally.
But doesn't mean that these policies shouldn't go forward, because what we're really doing is pouring a foundation that hopefully can be a piece of a successful model that does pencil out, and that then you and I can go like, okay, we're back, or
totally.
whatever,
Totally.
And so, so that's kind of the idea, is that this, so the, Appellation of Origin, it's a cool program. It'll be first in the world. California will continue to lead in that regard. Amazing. That's one thing. Another thing that's worth plugging is, the OCal program, which I do for my day job with EnviroCan. And, that's the first organic equivalency that is for cannabis.
It's a big deal.
The reason you can't call cannabis organic is because federal status and the, USDA and the term organic, all that kind of stuff. But right now there's something that is, administered by the CDFA again, and has is based on the NOP, and is the, a true comparable organic certification backed by the state of California.
It's good for consumers to learn about this too and ask for OCal.
Yeah.
Right? And do you have OCal products? Because it's supporting those operators that went through this process.
Yeah, and so
living up to those standards.
So there's that, which again took years to roll out and is slow going, but is getting traction. There's right now what we can talk about a little more is the Legacy Cannabis Genetics project, which is a multidisciplinary. I'm gonna say the words wrong here, but it's a community-driven participatory study.
Well done.
It's probably wrong. It sounds right there.
It sounded right to me.
But the idea is you're going out into it's not something that, with cannabis or anything else that isn't just completely visible, or that, populations who feel vulnerable are participating in. It's harder to get information than just going to the library and searching.
Yeah.
Right. And so this is a program or a project that is, documenting the histories of California cannabis plants, and then
Amazing.
yeah, and so part of it is oral history interviews. There's folks from Humboldt, um, Cal Poly Humboldt now cannabis studies department involved. There's a historian from Berkeley involved. There's folks with the cannabis herbarium who are doing plant pressings. And
Eleanor.
and then there's the Origins Council and a couple social equity groups, and
That's right.
And this is a DCC grant funded study that's taking 3 years. So
Another positive thing.
very exciting
to
stuff
see the money go
at a
towards something.
certain level. Now again, is this going to rescue any farmer? Will there be any surviving small farmers in the current legal paradigm to take advantage of it? Maybe not.
Maybe. Yeah.
But these are the pieces that are coming into place so that folks could possibly re-enter the market in the future, right?
Yeah.
And it's and that legacy cannabis genetics project will be first in the world. The information coming off that will be used and benefit everyone at a certain level. And then there's the equity grants and the different things that obviously haven't panned out the way that they were intended to, but are positives at a certain level, or at least positive attempts to reckon with the history that exists.
Yeah.
Right.
Sure.
For lack of a better description. And so all of these things in California are still worth our attention if we have any attention left, right?
Yeah.
And so to get back a little bit, it's like these. I kind of view these different pieces as like a pieces of a puzzle or a stool, the different legs of the stool.
Sure.
And another thing that is unfortunately didn't get signed and was baby steps towards it anyways, but the AB 1111, the farmers market, air quote type bill, the different direct to consumer attempts that folks are
Farmers
making.
could go direct.
Yeah, and so these are the things. So if we think about what you and I would do if we're like, or you're from, Apple Hill, right? So we've got the
exactly.
most chronic apples that anyone ever had, and all this stuff. We're not going to go down to Safeway and be like, what'll you give me? Or can I supply every store? Or can I do this? Like the boutique food or boutique ag or organic ag or small-time ag, when it reemerged in the 70s and 80s, they discovered that they had to make their own supply chain, right?
Yeah,
and that's where we have the birth of a lot of that stuff is Santa Cruz and this area.
Amazing.
And connected to cannabis. But it's, what they had to do is they, started food co-ops, they started hippie grocery stores,
That's right.
They did farmers markets, they did food
yeah.
stands, the whole know your farmer kind of stuff. And so it doesn't need to be that small scale rustic and just homesy, because we've watched that grow into Whole Foods, that model.
True.
Right?
True.
And so those supply chains and new markets that they were opened up, turned eventually back into the biggest things and eventually back into the problem that they had, but we'll ignore that for now. But really the idea is, until there is, the barriers of entry and regulation are more feasible, which they're currently not at the local and state level, and probably at the federal level whenever that happens.
Sure.
The access to the market, you need basically direct access to go farm direct, And right now we watch people be able to do that out of their apartment on Esty and all the stuff for us. So there's a model, and frankly, people are doing it on Instagram, just cutting out the middleman.
That's right.
And so we need to be able to have direct access to our customer base, and so that piece is one of these puzzle pieces that is being worked on. And then we also need to be able to differentiate our crops from other crops, and that's where the regions, the
Yeah.
locale, the different, even county and of origin and even state, things. And so these pieces need to come in for it to be safe for us, the proverbial me and you, but there's thousands of us to return.
100%.
Right? And then it also has to be available, because even though we've started with that, the culture of excellence is alive and well all over.
Yeah.
Right.
It has grown.
There's not a clear pathway from, like, when we were younger, from that small scale growing to that's non-commercial to a legal commercial path. You either have to jump into a legal state with probably $1 million price tags,
That's correct,
or you have to do it illegally.
Yeah.
And that can't last, and so there needs to be a way for, someone who is working in this industry, like a lot of us displaced people are just working at someone else's corporate farm right now and waiting for the time is right.
Exactly.
Or the people that start, some of the best farmers I know, we'll just name Garrett at Coastal Sun.
He's the best.
Right?
Yeah.
I mean,
it's funny that you said that, because that's what I thought of.
And
who's the best? Oh, yeah, Garrett.
It's like he learned to farm on a tractor.
Yeah.
And he's seen tens of thousands of plants.
Oh,
like what we saw, or the generation before us, like, who is doing small numbers of plants, like and so.
Yeah, he's doing it by the acre.
Yeah, and they're acre farming and stuff. And so here's the next bit is that, in order for him to be able to either do a small romantic hillside like we want, or start his very own brand and take the regenerative farming practices that he's helped develop there and go in his own direction eventually, there has to be a functional regulatory system.
Yeah,
and there has to be access to new markets, whether you're small or large. There has to be all these things in place, or else it's just a bad idea. And so we were working for the future of the culture of excellence to be able to spread into the commercial market, right? And those models to be able to scale and prove themselves. So we're not, or I'm not, sitting here saying that there is any division ultimately between the long-term interests of California cannabis in general, whether you're, I hate to say it, glass house, we'll just say.
Yeah, you might
whether
as well
you're
say
glass house or you're the small, me and you, hoping to enter the market.
That's right.
I made a horrible joke where I was saying that, some child working at Glass House today deserves to be able to start their own cannabis business. Now that there's literal children working it, and they're not from, maybe they aren't, allegedly.
Allegedly, that was the story.
Right?
Yeah.
But that child deserves a shot, not just to stay in this country, but to grow some dank.
Here.
And I want to smoke that dank.
Yeah.
If you've been working at California's largest cannabis farm, even if it's a corporate mess, and you've been doing that since you were not supposed to be doing it, like, I want to smoke your dank when you're 33.
Yeah.
Like,
that's a lot of experience.
And I want you to be able to have the choice to not go into a multi-million-dollar
have to work
buy-in and get investment and have to compromise your your dank off the bat because you're trying to fit it into this model. And so, I mean, that's a joke and it's an awful one, but it's
pretty spot on.
It really is what it's going to take. And then, so to get back to those, like, California cannabis, right, is, in my mind, it's the same whether you're a hillside or one of these larger things, because, again, in Australia and watching worldwide flow, they also were sold out of it, but they had South African weed.
Wow.
So there's a few.
What?
Yeah.
That's really cool.
Yeah, it's super cool. I wanted to buy it, but it was sold out.
Because it's so good.
And it probably sucked, like, whatever. But, like, I wanted to, buy it.
That's cool, man. I had no idea.
And so then there's numerous countries around the world
making moves
for the international trade and the production. Wow. So if we think about what...
And it's an above board international trade. That's so cool.
Like, and I mean, Colombia, I think, like, a few other of the real historic and, like,
you're right,
real historic legacy pit. I mean, the haze came from Colombia, And so, like, if we're going to grow haze and want to brag about it, like,
that's the real
we're going to
roots.
have to beat that.
Yeah.
And we're going to have to beat that price point. And it's like grapes. It's like, where are you, you know, the bulk grape can come from anywhere, I'm told now. And that's a lot of the problem with the crash here. So California's like reputation with cannabis and is our only shot. The culture of excellence is, at the end of the day, all we have except for nice weather. But it's overpriced nice weather.
Yeah, it is.
If they grow the right strains in Colombia or fucking Afghanistan, they're going to crush us.
Yeah.
So this, like, we're not in that different of a boat from the glass houses and anyone who is attempting to, like, make a living someday again.
Yeah, that's true.
And so that's good news.
Yeah.
Right? Because so much of our time has been talked and still is focused on the good and the bad in there, and that's real. That story needs to be told, but it also needs to be told that, like, all of us have large shared interests.
Yeah,
you know?
Yeah.
And so back to, you know, some of these projects, it's like the appellation of origin stuff is like some of the biggest gardens you drive by in California in Santa Barbara are right next to huge high-end vineyards.
Wow.
You know?
Yeah.
And these are right now the, you know, the gardens that are like almost laughed at. You couldn't be doing anything but bammer out of that field.
Yeah, that's right.
A lot of times probably is not what we would call good weed.
Yeah.
You know?
It's cheap.
But doesn't mean you can't, people aren't going to figure it out down there. And it doesn't mean that in a certain sense with the right strain,
that's right.
You know, that couldn't be famous California weed at the same time.
Yeah.
And so, and it's...
Yeah, right. Genetics you can do really well, even if it's at scale.
Well, and let's just say we arm Garrett again, our wonder boy, with the greatest haze cut that Corralitos has ever seen, and we organic row crop it. And yeah, he's on a tractor, but we try to not drive it on the nice spot. And like we do we got clover, we got
put their hands
sheep out there, and all the whole thing.
Sure.
Like I want to smoke that weed, even if there's 30 acres of it. If there's 30 acres of it, I might say good, like because I want to smoke a lot of it.
I want a lot of it. It won't run out.
Yeah, and
like
so
South African weed.
And the ownership and how the like model works, that's another issue. You know, in my radical mind, I want them to be worker co-ops and blah blah blah.
Amen.
But like,
why not?
No business, no matter how it's organized, isn't going to work unless it's grown the dank or something that for the price point is awesome and all that. And a lot of that price point cannabis is just going to come out of other countries, I would imagine, at some point. And a lot of it is coming out of other regions right now. Price point cannabis is gangster desert death weed.
Gnarly. Yeah, true.
You know? And that's not the culture of excellence in California. And so these Appalachian stuff, the OCal stuff, the legacy genetics projects, like, and then the direct-to-consumer things and the dropping of barriers of entry and the, parity with ag or parity with hemp or whatever.
Yeah, so weird,
Say it is like, all those things need to be in place for it to work. But, like, we could tell stories about how all of these things are happening right now, some faster than others. And, again, it's not in time to save anybody who's got a farm or anyone who's relying on a certain model to make it feed their family. Like that's awful. It's one of the most tragic things I've seen in cannabis,
Yeah.
But it's like we are in where we're in this thing.
The good with the bad.
Yeah,
right?
we're gonna keep going.
Yeah.
And so those are kind of just like I don't know, it's awful to call it silver lining, but these are things that happen despite everyone's effort to ruin it. There is still some awesomeness to be had, and it's more awesome than ever.
You're right.
In these kind of ways. So outside of the license system, outside of the commercial system, things are cooler than ever. The whole goal was to
yeah, you're right.
Let's put everyone out of business.
Yeah,
like everyone had access to backyards, and you don't really need that much space to supply your friends and family.
That's the best part of it. Or if you're into seeds and genetics, you don't need a lot to make a lot.
Yeah.
Of seeds and spread that and share that and develop things.
So right now we've got all these crazy non-commercial folks are bubbling around creating the coolest stuff that's ever been smoked. We'll just say that. That's happening right now. It just couldn't not be happening with the amount of crosses and collisions and like
happy accidents.
Yeah, and they're all like, a lot of them are growing living soil, and like
you're right.
or the knowledge about how to do things, the knowledge about how to overfeed has gone way up in our lifetime, but also the acknowledgement of how you don't overfeed and how you make
living
good
soils.
weed.
Yeah,
It's like that's spread too, and once you
really
take
big.
the financial motivation out of it, it's like, and you're not getting paid by the pound anymore because you're not getting paid at all. It becomes, how rad can I make this?
That's true.
And that's super fun. And so we've got the best weed ever that's spinning around here, but you can't buy that, right?
Yeah,
so that's a huge potential.
You gotta grow your own. Yeah.
You've got the whole license system that's a complete mess, but there is folks working on making it better.
That's right. Responsive policy.
We're out of the way of that mess.
Mm-hmm.
We're over here making the coolest stuff ever and smoking the best stuff ever and smoking some shitty stuff too that's interesting and just the whole thing.
True.
And then, the racist drug war bit of it, it's like, that is a very real cliche, and it's like less and less people are getting their lives ruined, and more of them are having access to this. So we have all the ingredients to have a very valuable thing, that is out there. And it's right now there's tons of money in people are buying cannabis still.
Yeah, that's the thing.
It doesn't pencil out. So a lot of the industries. So this will be like to the investors out there or whatever. My pitch is like. So there is still massive opportunity somehow in cannabis. It's probably not right now, probably not in California. But if you look at the fundamentals of I don't know anything about anything, but what is the rest of the, what is a crypto's value? What's really behind that? What's really behind a lot of these companies that are
a lot of this
huge.
AI stuff? Yeah.
There could be stuff that's speculative beyond the concrete value of cannabis that we can point to.
True.
That there is something real
There's
somewhere down there. It's not just a total pyramid scheme.
Yeah.
If you're sick of these total pyramid schemes, come over here. We're not the total one. There's something down there at the base of the pyramid if you dig far enough.
There is.
And I think a lot of that's bubbling up. And then also would we have rather preferred that the 2015 vision or paranoid vision of a lot of this was that giant corporations are going to come in and just take it.
Yeah. And that's true.
And
we had a show about that.
They face planted as hard as we did.
Yeah.
And so that value that's still spinning out there, we haven't had the right set of regulations and progress on all these fronts that we've had to make it really profitable for anyone except for people who are just finding a weird angle in it, because people are still making money. It's just not, the system they've laid out isn't going to actually work unless you do something to make it work in most senses. That's not saying that there aren't businesses out there that haven't figured out a way to make it in spite of all these challenges.
Yeah, I'm thinking of Grant and Canna Cruz seems to be making a way.
I mean, we were talking about him, again, not to just name everyone we were talking about earlier today with Jim, but we were talking about him of just
he seems to be making it work.
Yeah, and I mean, from the very first time we ever saw any of his jars, it was good weed.
Yeah, right? True.
And he had so many flavors on the shelf. He had the extracts of the flavors.
That's right.
Him and the people involved with that they really are committed to this culture of excellence that we're talking about.
Yeah, so that's another case example.
Yeah, and strong agronomy, some of these things that I list, that they're making it work in spite of
this broken thing,
the broken system, right?
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah,
wow.
And so think about as the system reorients and starts to make sense and pencil out. Think about how successful Grant will be.
And strong, yeah.
I mean, think about
And
like
Garrett.
Yeah.
He might be on his own.
Yeah, Garrett will just be driving a tractor up and down Central Valley.
Good. Or go to Colombia.
Yeah, talent scouted to Afghanistan, But I mean, that's a very real observation, right? Is that there is like, as dysfunctional as this whole thing is, that there's folks that are in it that are proving a model to work, or proving a model that doesn't work, and we need to encourage, as me and you on the sideline. We need to hand them a cup of water on the marathon and clap and the whole thing, because really the folks who oftentimes, because they had gotten too deep into it to stop, they really have gone and shown us that, this what might work and what might not. And what we want is, as these pieces that we talked about come into place, we're going to be able to watch the folks who are still in it and see what they make of it. And somebody's going to establish a lane that is repeatable.
Yeah.
And when, as folks start to get, it's like craft brew or something. It's like when we were young, there probably was just like Sam Adams or something.
Yeah, totally. And then maybe Sierra Nevada came around.
Yeah,
and that was a big change.
And I don't even really drink alcohol, but like when I go places, like if I'm like, well, I want to have the local beer. Like we're in Australia, where it's like beer is.
That's
like,
water.
Yeah, it's it's like there's local beer that made commemorative cans for the body surfing contest.
How cool!
And like
that's cool culture too.
And so that, like, once you start trying craft beer, you want to try more and more and more and more and more. And so that's where I think there still is that model for what is like boutique cannabis, culture of excellence kind of stuff, and that spreading everywhere is what we want. Is I want to be able to go to anywhere in the world and have local craft unique cannabis from that place.
Yeah.
Right. And so I think that, are we destroying some of the old ways that people used to have that experience? Like, absolutely. We can't go on the hash trails of the hippies and go to India and all that stuff. But there's, plenty of people out there doing their best to reconstruct any of these things.
Innovating
find new strains that work well over there. And, I'm not so much of a cling to the past. I always think the best weed is tomorrow.
Amen. I agree.
And so I'm really excited.
Ahead of us. Some of the best weeds ahead of us.
And so, not to say that we haven't ruined 10,000-year-old cannabis cultures with shitty Amsterdam genetics provided from California, and not to say that there isn't this exact thing happening. Like, how it's kind of shitty for us as Santa Cruz children to be like, oh, we lost our jobs, but what about if you're from these, Afghanistan, and
10 generations.
Yeah, it's
ganja farmer, hashishans.
Yeah, and so those folks,
tied
are
to the religion, tied to the tradition.
Yeah, those are cultures of excellence that I want to see revived and spread too. So we're not saying those things aren't very real concerns. What we're saying is that this model that functions, that's the only hope anybody's got.
Yeah.
So I don't just think I'm in it together with Glass House. I think I'm in it together with the Afghans I've never met and maybe don't even grow anymore, and
some South Africans.
Yeah, and all these folks. And I believe that for better or for worse, we got to go forward, because it seems that's how time works. And we're gonna have to get something in California that works, and hopefully we can export that, because we've exported a lot of good weed. We've exported a lot of bad weed. We've exported a lot of good ideas about cannabis policy, and we've done a whole bunch of bad ones too.
Implemented some terrible ones.
And so, the positive things of continuing to lead is all, that's what I always say about Santa Cruz. We've been a leader in cannabis excellence and cannabis policy, my whole life, and we want to continue to lead. And So I don't know how much time we've got here, but
We got like 3 minutes, 30 seconds, and I think, man, that was. If you just want to kind of wrap it up,
Yeah, I mean,
in a bow, 'cause
yeah.
I think you're already doing it.
sorry, I just
I love this. This is
it's a
the
little bit of a
coolest-
manic speech and
This
less
is the coolest
of the
show I've ever. I've said 12 words. This is awesome. But everything you're saying is just so timely, and it resonates, and it's really refreshing too, because it's not doom and gloom like all the farmers I've had on and all these breeders that are troubled.
Yeah.
There's a lot. You're right. It's good perspective. I think Ed Rosenthal had a pot for pennies dream.
Yeah.
And that's kind of where we're going.
Yeah, it's ironically we're there. Sorry, Ed. Same
happened.
destination,
Oh,
different
yeah.
journey, you know.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's my big thing is like, and thank you for being anyone who's listening to this, because I'm kind of just trying out
It's really great.
the speech, because
We're
there's no
recording
more
it,
there's no
too.
more weed meetings to go stand up and talk for an hour in front of. But here it it really is my genuine perspective, and
Yeah.
I'm like everybody, and I've lost my career and have tried to figure out how I'm gonna make this whole thing, and I've
Totally.
dedicated way too much time to political advocacy and all this stuff that I can't quite say I do again. But at the same time, I'm really glad and feel blessed to be in the position that I'm in right now.
Nice.
And I think that winning in cannabis looks like just staying in it. And I don't mean staying in the license thing or even staying in it as a living. Just commitment to awesome cannabis. Even if it's just, I want to smoke it.
Yeah.
Like that.
Amen. Yeah.
That's amazing. And this is the culture that we're in, and I think that we're still in it, and it lives on. So like despite what you might be seeing in Garberville, like cannabis lives. So
It's pretty rough in Garberville.
yeah, no, it's awful. No offense to and I'm saying all this and we're laughing at horrible things.
I know.
But it is
gallows humor.
It's super, super real, and I just I haven't heard anybody, whether it's a regulator, a business operator, or even just a enthusiast, really say we're stoked. I've heard a ton of people say that we're stoked about this nug, or we're stoked about this thing, or this hustle, or this or that. But ultimately, I want to just say that we have come from something in my lifetime that was worse than this.
Yep.
When I first started this thing, I never thought it was even a good idea to stay in it, or a safe idea to stay in it longer than a few years.
Sure.
And then I was gifted this whole arc of one wild ride of cannabis and being there for the circus, and my only goal is to just go on another 20 years of this and see where we land. And nobody cried for the smugglers when they had to sell their sailboat because domestic weed put them out of business.
True.
Nobody cried for $4,000 pounds when the Canadians undercut it. Nobody cried for their neighbor when they were pumping out $1,600 depths and undercutting their indoor. Nobody. There's no crying in cannabis. No one gives a fuck. So it's just you should be stoked that we're still involved at all. And if you're not, and you've had your life ruined, plenty of people had their life ruined for no reason. You did it for a cause.
Yeah.
So, sorry, everyone.
Thank you, Pat. You've been listening to The Cannabis Connection. I'm your host, Christopher Carr. Have a beautiful weekend. That was rad, man.